Good eye.
Good eye.
Been talking about Ruse, so I'm in an Australian type mood.
Fair enough. No worries. Always fun talking about Ruse. Gotta love the Ruse.
Hello, Sophie. Hello, Z Beauty, and hello, Corey. How is everyone today?
Yes, hello.
And Lola's joining us.
And
via
Lola.
Camera. She's in frame, kind of.
She's kind of in frame. She's sitting. Lola, come closer. You should come closer so the people can see you.
Oh man, what a week.
Yeah, tell me about it. It has been a week. And it is not over yet.
Week it has been a week.
It's not over yet.
I need some all the young dudes in my life.
Yeah.
Little Harry Potter.
I actually need to pull that up and figure out where we're at here. Because I don't 100%
I can't remember what happened last time, but I remember it was kind of a build-up.
Mission.
Something was going to happen.
Mooney's got to go on a mission for Dumbledore.
Oh, was that it?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they had to plan their final prank.
Hi guys, update. Got my rabbit. Her name is Lucille Ball, and she has taken over the house already.
Oh, that's awesome, Mike.
Oh, that's fantastic. I want to see it. Also, that is a great name.
I know.
Lucille Ball. I love that. That is awesome.
Middle name Fur. Lucille Furball. I guess that'd be better if it was a cat, though. But still. Rabbits are fluffy. They're little balls of fur. It's great.
It works. Oh, and Remus wrote the letter to Grant. Remus wrote the letter to his mom.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's got to go on a mission for Dumbledore. That was the last chapter.
Oh, yep. Okay.
The doggo is eating food right now.
Yeah, he's actually right off camera, chowing down.
Right, BD?
Now he's looking. Now he's coming. Here he is.
He's
Come
coming.
say hi. Come on. Come on. Up, up, up. You don't want to get up?
Maybe he can't get up. There. There he goes. Oh, there's the BD.
There's the doggo.
There's the BD. Let's go! There's that boy. There's that boy. Nice boy. Are you ready to listen to all the young dudes? What about you, Lola? Are you ready?
Bailey's always ready to listen to a good story.
Brandon loves when he takes over the videos. Well, I mean, who wouldn't? Look at him.
I know, I just become a background character. I'm not even here. I'm just a person with a dog head.
Yep.
Or Bailey is just a dog with human arms.
Mm. Oh, Z Beauty loves it too. Because he's so damn cute, she says.
Alright, settle down. His ego's already big enough. Just took him for a walk, and everyone we see, oh, what a handsome boy.
You said the word.
Well, I mean, he is a handsome boy.
I meant the other word.
Oh, yeah.
Good thing I don't think he...
We just got back from it, so I don't think he's going to go crazy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we try not to say the W word around him. He gets too excited when he hears it.
He does. He thinks it's going to happen. Oh my goodness. All right.
It's gotten to the point where he knows how it's spelt. I can't even spell it.
Yeah, that's true. He knows what the letters are. I just needed a sip and another sip.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. All right, now shall we just jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here we go. Are you ready, BD? Are you ready, BD? Okay, you're ready. Are you sure you're ready? Okay. All right. Chapter 128. 7th year. Preparation. H. Just kidding. Strange it is to be beside you, many years and tables turned. You probably not believe me if I told you all I've learned, and it's very, very weird indeed to hear the words like forever plead. Those ships run through my mind, I cannot cheat. It's like looking in the teacher's face complete. I can say nothing to you but repeat what I heard, that love is just a 4-letter word. Tuesday, 9th of January, 1978. Right, Mooney. James marched into the great hall the next morning, carrying a pile of books he could barely see over. He slammed them all down on the breakfast table in front of Remus, disrupting the porridge he'd been picking at. He didn't have much of an appetite, somehow. What are these? He reached over to pick up the nearest book. Advanced Defensive Spells. Potter? Lily straightened her back, staring over the pile with a look of bemusement. Have you been in the library? In the morning? Instead of flying? We need to get Mooney prepared, Lily. But you said mornings were sacred to you, Sirius said. You said you had to pay homage to the gods of the Quidditch pitch, Peter grinned. I can miss one morning, James said dismissively. Prongs? Remus grabbed his hand and gushed at him dramatically. I'm touched. Get off. James snatched his hand back, ears turning bright red. You can all stop making fun of me. Am I the only one taking this seriously? Hey, Sirius smirked. Remus and Peter groaned in anticipation of what was coming. I am always serious. Peter and Remus covered their eyes in embarrassment, but it must have been the first time Lily had ever heard that joke, because she snorted with laughter so suddenly that her tea shot out of her nose. This was the funniest thing that even the Marauders had seen in ages. Then they were all hysterical for a good 5 minutes. Each time any of them managed to stop, Lily would snort again, or James would waggle his eyebrows, and they would be helpless with laughter once more. When they'd finally calmed down, Remus opened the first book eagerly and decided that he would eat his porridge after all. They went to their lessons with a new sense of purpose, and James suggested that they all meet in the library after the last bell to begin work on preparing Remus for whatever was ahead. They did this every day for a whole week, commandeering a block of 6 desks behind some stacks in a corner where they could have complete privacy, pushed them all together and covered the thing in textbooks on battle theory, dueling techniques, defensive incantations and hexes. Peter even made a threatening sign which read, Marauders War Council, do not disturb, which worked like a charm, possibly because it had been literally charmed by Lily, and meant that they could leave their work there and return to it whenever they liked. Remus abandoned his study groups, asking Christopher to take over. James nominated Marlene to take over 2 of his Quidditch sessions, and even Lily stopped going to Slug Club meetings that week, though she did try to break into Slughorn's study to get her hands on some Felix Felicis for Remus, but had no luck and was almost caught. In short, all 5 of them spent as much time as possible working toward the same cause, preparing Remus for his mission. He'd been teasing James before, but Remus really was touched. Only there was hardly any time to dwell on it, as they all knuckled down to study harder than any of them ever had before. Remus just thanked his lucky stars that James was so good at defense against the dark arts. They'd never had a teacher stay longer than a year in that subject, so Remus's own knowledge was patchy. James and Lily's combined efforts helped him cover more ground in a week than he had since his OWLs. You're good at charms, and that's half the battle, James said appraisingly as they stood in the empty common room one evening. The rest is really just quick thinking and determination. And we know you can do those, Lily encouraged, tidying up the mess they'd made trying to freeze sofa cushions mid-air. It won't be like Diagon Alley, Sirius reassured him, slapping him on the back. Because you'll know what's coming. You've got time to get ready. Easy enough to say, Remus bit his lip. I'm okay at most of this, here with you lot, but if I was actually defending myself, And I still can't do a Patronus. Don't worry about that now, just focus on the simpler stuff, James advised, rubbing his chin. The Patronus will come. It's not as if you're not strong enough, you apparate like it's nothing. That's easy, Remus sighed. That's just thinking. Patronuses are feeling. Can somebody please let me down now? Peter called from above their heads, where he'd been paralysed mid-air. Dear Remus, thanks for writing to me. My Christmas was good. I'd never had turkey before. It was nice. No flat yet, but I am trying. Still staying with my aunt, as you'll see from the address, but I like it here. I like the sea and may learn to swim. I've been seeing a lad down here, but he ain't as clever as you. Nice body, though. I miss you very much. Your Grant, XXX. Dear Remus, thank you for your letter. I was so pleased to hear from you. I would like to begin by assuring you that I am quite well following the events in Diagon Alley over Christmas. I was sorry to hear that you and your friends were there too. I had hoped the war would be long over by the time you were ready to leave school. I will be staying with my grandmother for a while longer, but expect to be back to work no later than Easter. I have no doubt you will understand why I can't say any more than that. Best of luck with the NEWTs. L. Ferox. Saturday, 15th of January 1978. By the following weekend, they'd definitely hit their stride, and Remus was feeling more confident than ever, as long as he didn't think too much about Livia's incredible ability with wandless magic. He tried to convince himself that he was over-prepared, if anything, that Dumbledore merely required him to show his face in Hogsmeade to see if this other wolf, if there even was another wolf, sniffed him out. He might not use anything James had taught him at all. Yeah, right, that nasty voice in the back of his head spoke, always at night, when everyone else was asleep and he was most alone. As if you've ever been that lucky. They spent all Saturday in the library, all four of them, but on Sunday Lily was required to mediate a prefect dispute, and Peter had an afternoon detention for poor uniform, so for a good portion of the day, it was just Remus, James and Sirius working in their quiet little study nook. Sirius and James were on the blacklist for the restricted section, so Remus went in alone and came back with the biggest book on curses he could find. There are some second years on the other side of the hall taking bets on whether we're really behind studying for NEWTs or just planning the most amazing prank Hogwarts has ever seen, he said, setting the huge tome down on top of three more. I'm so proud of our legacy, aren't you, Mr. Prongs? Sirius smirked over the book he was taking notes from. Quite so, Mr. Padfoot, quite so, James replied, scanning a glossary. Aha! He grabbed a book triumphantly and began flipping pages. Sirius looked up. Found something good? Maybe, James murmured, reading fast. Remus began to look at the contents of the Book of Curses. The chapter titles were truly horrible, and he hoped he'd never actually have to use any of this stuff. Okay, James said. Look at this. He'd finished reading and flipped the book to show Remus and Sirius, who were on the other side of the table. I really think this sort of thing plays to your strengths, Moony. It's all intuitive stuff with a lot of punch behind it. The way you do pranks. Sirius and Remus both stood to pore over the book, leaning forward on the desk. Remus's shoulders were still so sore from the last moon. The pain-free days between moons seemed to be getting shorter the older he got. His tendons felt like hard-knotted rope rubbing against the bone. He stretched to rub a particularly sore spot while he read, pressing down with his fingertips and breathing in slightly at the pain. Sirius moved closer and, perhaps without thinking, reached out to rub the sore spot with his own long fingers. He was much better at it than Remus, who felt a wave of relief as Sirius worked small, soothing circles into his muscle. He sighed tiredly. Remus was the first to finish reading and looked up at James. The bespectacled young man was not looking at the text, though. He was staring at them across the table, specifically at the point where Sirius's hand was touching Remus's neck. James's mouth had fallen open slightly, and there was a question in his eyes. Remus moved to alert Sirius, who finally looked up at his friend. Seeing immediately what he'd done, he just stared back, still for a moment. Remus half expected him to step away, withdraw his hand. But he didn't. Instead, Sirius wrapped his arm around Remus's shoulder and squeezed him, very deliberately, all the while holding James's gaze. James closed his mouth, looked at them both again, and nodded wordlessly. Remus straightened up, letting Sirius's arm drop. He had to leave them alone, that much was obvious. He cleared his throat. I'm sure there's a book I've read which goes into more depth in this. I think I've got a copy upstairs. I'll just go and get it. See you in an hour or so, maybe? Sirius and James nodded, still staring at each other. Remus left quickly, glad the library was almost empty. He felt hot and cold all over, a familiar feeling to guilt, even though he knew he ought not to feel it. Halfway to the tower, he bumped into Lily. "Hiya, Moony," she grinned. "Seen Potter?" "Library," Remus said. "But I wouldn't if I were you. He and Sirius are having a chat." "Oh, I can interrupt a chat," she started off. Remus touched her arm quickly. "Lily, no." He bit his lip. "Sorry, but I really think you ought to give them a bit of time. Sirius really needs it, okay?" "What's happened?" Lily looked startled by his seriousness. Remus sighed heavily. Well, she was about to find out anyway, and it was as much his to tell as it was Sirius's. Come with me. Shall we go outside?" "Okay." Lily followed him, looking curious and concerned at the same time, a little crease forming in her freckled brow. Outside, in the crisp winter sunshine, everything seemed a bit cheerier. Remus steeled himself, stomach rolling. He had to keep reminding himself that he'd been wanting this, to have it all out in the open. Only now it seemed utterly terrifying. They wandered toward the lake. Remus gazed across the surface, squinting against the reflected shards of dazzling light. "Remus?" Lily asked. "You're making me nervous." "Sorry," he blinked. It's about me and Sirius." "You and Sirius? No, what have you done? Only you two could get in trouble during the first week back." "No, it's nothing like that." Remus laughed despite himself. He rubbed the back of his head, casting around for the right words. "Look, you know how you're always saying I should, find someone?" "Yeah?" Lily frowned again, searching his face. Remus raised his eyebrows, waiting for her to get there. It took longer than he'd expected, but her eyes widened suddenly. "Oh my God!" She covered her mouth with her hands and sat down rather suddenly on the nearby stone bench. Remus sat beside her slowly, his joints stiff. "Sirius?" she said. "Sirius," he nodded. "Oh my God." "Yeah. Sorry." "No, Remus, don't be sorry. Wow. Okay. Give me a minute." He did, waiting patiently, looking out at the lake. He didn't look at her because it didn't matter. Lily would be okay. Lily would take it in her stride. "And he feels the same way? You're sure, Remus?" "Couldn't be surer." Remus smiled. It was suddenly very easy to smile. He pulled his cloak and the neck of his jumper aside covertly to show her the reddish-purple bruise Sirius's mouth had left there a few nights before. "Oh my God," she said again. He covered it up, blushing but still smiling. "Does James know?" "He's finding out right now. That's why I wanted you to give them a bit of space." "Yeah, no, of course," she nodded. "I understand." "I've wanted to tell you for ages." "Ages? How long has it been?" "Since the summer. Well, it got serious over the summer, but there was stuff going on for a while before that. Since Sirius broke up with Mary." "Bloody hell." She shook her head again. "So what? Sirius is your boyfriend? Are you in love with him?" "Whoa!" Remus blinked, shuffling away. "I mean, steady on. Let's just... Look, it's out now, and that's plenty." Lily gave him a very long, appraising stare. Then she nodded. "All right, then." Remus raised his eyebrows. "All right, then." "You said it's serious, though. It's not just messing about?" "No, definitely not. I know it's unexpected." Lily shook her head and looked at him with big, earnest eyes. "Are you happy?" "Yes," without hesitation. "All right, then," she said, briskly, back to her sensible self. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. Look, I didn't take divination because it's bollocks, but I'm pretty sure we're all in for a really crap time right soon. Quite soon. My God, you sound more like James every day. It's ridiculous, Remus snorted. She slapped his knee lightly. Listen to me. It's going to be hard, and it's happening faster than I thought it would. It's going to be scary, all the time, for a long time. But if we can keep being happy together and making each other happy, then good, brilliant. If it's serious for you and you for him, then brilliant. Jesus, Evans. Remus buried his face in her hair, pulling her into a huge hug. Lily and Remus waited for another half hour or so before returning to the library, where they found that the books had all been taken out and James and Sirius were gone. Remus didn't have the map on him, but fortunately Lily knew James, and they headed straight for the Quidditch pitch. Sure enough, two familiar figures were racing through the air between the goalposts on their brooms. James was winning, but not by much. Remus could tell by Sirius's posture that he was pushing as hard as he could. He hadn't seen him concentrating like that on flying since being kicked off the team. Lily and Remus sat companionably in the lower stands and waited, rehearsing a few basic defensive spells. So last time I met a werewolf, Remus was saying. I still can't believe that happened, Lily shook her head amazed. Ferox showed up and fired some silver chains at her, so she apparated pretty quick. I could try that, but I'm only okay at transfiguration, and what if the silver backfires and gets me? There might be a potion that helps with your silver problem. Lily chewed her quill. I'll ask Slughorn, but otherwise it might not be worth the risk. Fair enough. Thud, thud. Two sets of heavy boots landed before them. James and Sirius stood panting and sweating, both clutching their brooms. Lily twirled her hair round her finger and tilted her head, and Remus fought not to do the same. All right, lads. She broke the ice. They nodded. Needed a break, Sirius explained apologetically. Change of scenery. Remus looked up at Prongs nervously. All right, Prongs, he asked, just managing to keep the tremor out of his voice. James looked at Sirius, then down at Remus. He shook his head, looking down, and reached an arm out, yanking Remus to his feet. Come here, you big prat, he boomed, enveloping him in a bear hug.
Aw, James. Hi, Angela. Hi, Kayla. That was sweet.
It was, wasn't it? It was cute.
Lily's being a bit of a buzzkill, though. Things are gonna get hard. We need to be happy while we can. It's like, I get what you mean, but you kind of ruin the in the moment.
I think she's just thinking very much about where things are in the world, and I think she's just like, this is good. We need to be happy while we can.
Yeah, we need more of this while we can before Voldemort takes over. I also like the little bit where they talk about the dark arts teacher and how they haven't had the same one for 2 years in a row.
Yeah, the little nod to the curse there.
James is gonna make you cry. Yeah.
James is being
a good friend.
He's such a good dude. Oh, James.
How dare they ever doubt that he would take it well?
Right? I mean, I get why they'd be nervous about it, but at the same time, it's like, come on, he is literally the best dude.
That's what I mean. Like, yeah, I get why they're nervous, but at the same time, I feel like anyone in their right mind would be like, James isn't gonna care.
Right.
Like, he was okay with Remus being a werewolf, but, oh, you two are dating? Oh.
He was okay with Remus being gay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. He was okay with Remus being gay, so...
Why would he... I think it was more about, is this going to upset the friend dynamic, and is James going to feel a certain way about the friend dynamic shifting or something?
Yeah, that's true. Will it ruin the friendship Sirius and James have?
Right. Or is it going to cause a rift with Sirius being with Lupin? How is that going to... affect the friendship dynamics and all that stuff. But
oh man, are we gonna see Peter trying to weasel his way back to being best friends with James now? Maybe he thinks that it's going to upset the dynamic, so we're gonna see more Peter. Just like, oh really? Well, James, I'm still the same old Peter you've always known.
yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting to see if that causes a shift with Peter. Also,
maybe we're gonna find out Peter was in love with Remus, and that's why he betrays them.
Also, Remus got a letter back from Ferox. He got a letter back from Grant, but he did not get a letter back from his mum.
No.
So, that's still out there.
That's true. I forgot he sent a letter to his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Good to hear Grant's doing good.
I know, I'm happy that Grant is doing good. That makes me happy.
I was gonna say, you were like really invested in Grant.
I like him. I don't want any more bad things to happen to him.
That's fair.
And I've said it before and I will agree. I think the way that James and Lily are being portrayed, it's going to be devastating.
Yeah.
It's going to be terrible.
You thought it was hard hearing about their death in the main stories.
Yeah.
Oh, you just wait.
Yeah. It's going to be terrible.
You thought Remus's death was hard in the main story. Just settle down. Just wait.
Just wait.
Thought Sirius's death was hard in the main story. I'm not ready for that one.
Yeah, that one's gonna suck.
No.
Should we hurtle closer to these tragic events?
Suppose there's no going back now.
All right, here we go. Next chapter. Ready?
What chapter are we on? How close are we to these tragic events?
Well, we're on chapter 129.
Out of 186.
88.
88. All right. 59 more chapters.
I'm pretty sure that chapter 174 is going to be the death of Lily and James.
Oh, wow. So we're not going to get much of old Remus.
Because the chapters after that are like year by year.
Oh, okay.
It's just how the year went.
That's fair. That. I feel like not much really happens in Remus's life between then and when he goes to Hogwarts. Just
to teach Harry, yeah.
You know, trying to get by, making ends meet, and then we all know what happens during the year when Harry's there.
Yeah.
Not much you can really talk about.
So we have plenty of time to continue to love James and Lily and have...
develop a deeper bond so that it hurts.
And then, more. You know... go to the wedding and witness the birth of Harry and watch them be loving, wonderful parents.
Then watch Wormtail betray them and hate Wormtail on
even
a
more,
whole new level.
You're right, even more than we already do. Oh, thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
All right, so we're on chapter 129. So we're like 40-something chapters away from the devastation.
I thought you were going to say to the end. I was about to say your math isn't right there, but
nope.
Then I was like, oh, you mean 174. Yes, you're right.
Chapter 129.
Are there spoilers? Yeah. It's about the Marauders, but some of the things foreshadow stuff that may happen in the book.
Or parallel things that happen in the books.
And, so we may say something along those lines here.
Yeah, when we discuss the chapters, sometimes we do spoilery. We do.
So the safe thing would be to save this story till after you've finished the main Harry Potter story.
Yep. If you've never read Harry Potter, you don't know the story at all, you might want to... and you don't want things spoiled. you might not want to listen just yet. Okay, here we go. Okay, I gotta go listen. I'll catch up to you guys soon. Keep making awesome videos. Thank you. You are very welcome, and we will do that.
Thanks for dropping in, Nate.
Yes, thank you for popping in to say hello. Chapter 129, 7th year. Instinct. You told him! Remus kissed Sirius as soon as they were alone. Well, he worked it out, Sirius said, laughing, as he was pushed backward into their bedroom. Lily and James had to head to a prefect's meeting, and Peter was still in detention. Remus had dragged Sirius upstairs as fast as he could climb, all aches and pains forgotten. But you told him, Remus insisted, running his tongue up Sirius's neck, collarbone to earlobe. Sirius shuddered, and the backs of his knees hit the bed frame. Remus gave him a shove that was half urgent, half playful, and they fell back together. Merlin, Sirius gasped as Remus continued his assault, climbing on top of him, a knee either side of Sirius's hips. If I'd have known this is how you'd respond, I'd have told Prongs ages ago. Shut up! Remus kissed him hard on the lips, hands on Sirius's belt. Sirius obeyed. Remus was a bit surprised too. Who'd have thought that confession was such a turn-on? If he wasn't careful, he'd be telling everyone he met. So, he said half an hour later, sitting by the window in his boxers, lighting a cigarette. Sirius lay on the bed, still vaguely stunned and staring at him. It went well. Sirius blinked very slowly, as if his eyelids were heavy. Remus grinned, exhaling smoke, trying to aim it through the crack in the window. James, what did he say? I think the first thing was, what the fuck are you playing at? But it got better from there, Sirius snorted. Did he ask a lot of questions? Sort of. Nothing I didn't expect, I suppose. What about Evans? She said, oh my god, about 100 times, but she came round fairly quickly. Prongs, too. Except the prat won't tell Wormtail for us. He says we have to do it. Well, fair enough. Remus sucked on his cigarette again, then blew the smoke into the room, watching it fill the space between them. What questions did he ask? Sirius closed his eyes, breathing in. Nothing scandalous. How long for? When did it start? Why didn't I tell him? That sort of thing. What did you say? I told the truth. Roll us a fag. Remus already had. He held it out. Sirius rolled onto his stomach and reached his long pale arm through the smoke to take it, placed it between his pursed lips and snapped with his fingers. He sucked, then rolled back, exhaling with a sigh. How do you feel? Remus asked, unable to tear his eyes away. It still seemed miraculous, beyond belief. Sirius Black, naked, in my bloody bed. Right now, bloomin' marvellous. He stretched, hand disappearing under one of the pillows. What's this? Oh! Remus blushed, jumping up from the window. I got some letters back. Ferox is okay, and, Grant. Sirius's lip curled as he picked up the postcard Grant had sent from Brighton. It had a colour photo of the pier on the front. The sea looked blue and the sun was shining. Remus was so glad he'd sent it. It was nice to picture Grant in a bright, cheerful place like that. Sirius continued smoking as he read it. He's seeing someone with a nice body, but he misses you? Remus jumped onto the bed and snatched the card away, raising it aloft so Sirius couldn't reach. He's seeing someone with a nice body and he misses me. Separate statements. Well, Sirius folded his arms, lying back again, stiff puffing. I hope you're writing to him about my gorgeous body. Of course, Remus laughed, laying back down beside him. They stared up at the red velvet bed curtains together. You're not really jealous, are you? Remus asked tentatively. No. Sirius nudged him gently with his elbow. Curious, maybe. About? What do you think? You and him. You never told me any detail. We were 15. There was no... Sorry.
You're doing that serious voice.
It's hurting today.
Tickly.
We were 15. There was no detail, just snogging, Remus tutted. Honestly, what a thing to ask. James did. About us. He never. All right, well, he didn't, but I knew he wanted to. No, he didn't. You're just being vain. Remus leaned over to stub out his cigarette in the cold cup of tea on his nightstand. Sirius caught him at the hip and pulled him over. Remus closed his eyes and let him be pulled. Thank Godric I had the map. I would have gone to the library. Merlin's balls! The door flew open and Peter stood gaping in the doorway, clapping his hands to his eyes. Remus leapt up from the bed as if Sirius were on fire and began scrabbling about for his trousers on the floor, shouting, Sorry, Pete! Sorry, Pete! Shit! 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 What the fuck? What the fuck? Peter shouted back, still covering his eyes. Sirius yanked the duvet up, staring at them both, then burst out laughing. Wormy, we've got something to tell you.
What a way to find out.
Poor Wormtail. Friday, 20th of January, 1978. Peter took a little while to get used to it, but then they all did, really, even Remus and Sirius. They kept forgetting that the Marauders knew, and they'd grown so used to consciously avoiding each other that they were oddly shy to show any sort of affection in front of the others. Of course, Remus kept reminding himself, it was better to keep a low profile anyway. They still had the rest of the school to worry about. You could tell Christopher, though, Sirius said as they left the library for the last time before the Hogsmeade trip. It was almost midnight, and they'd be chased out by Madame Pince, who wouldn't let them stay any longer, even when Lily and James had flashed their head boy and girl badges. Oh, now you remember his name, Remus yawned, clutching his books to his chest, really just for something to hold on to. I'm just saying. Sirius caught the yawn and covered his mouth, but continued speaking. He already knows half of it, no harm telling him the rest. Not really fair to let him keep pining away for you when there's no chance in... Sirius Black, are you jealous? Lily cackled, giddy with overtiredness. No, Sirius sniffed, nose in the air. I just don't want any misunderstandings. Well, if I survive tomorrow, then I'll think about it, Remus yawned again. That made everyone go quiet, and he regretted saying it. They walked back to the common room in solemn silence. Gryffindor Tower was peaceful and mostly empty. A few stray second years, up past their curfew, flew to their dorms as soon as they saw James and Lily, and the Marauders took their usual seats by the fireplace. Remus settled into his armchair and immediately returned to the book he'd been reading before Pince had so rudely interrupted. Sirius flicked his wand at the kettle hanging over the fireplace, and Lily summoned some clean teacups from the cupboard, but still no one spoke until the water was boiled and the tea brewing in its pot. Moony, Sirius said softly. Put the book down, eh? We've done so much already. Doesn't feel like enough, Remus replied, feeling prickly and irritable. I know I'm missing something. Everyone kept staring at him, and by now he didn't know whether it was because they were amazed, or repulsed, about the whole Sirius thing, or whether they were convinced he was about to run away and join the werewolves. It's loads, James said, now pouring the tea and handing Remus a saucer. Honestly, you know enough now to walk any defense against the dark arts exam. Might as well bunk off the rest of the year. This isn't an exam, Remus snapped. The cup and saucer shook in his hands, so he set it down on the armchair. On the arm of the chair. He had a feeling Sirius had noticed that, but hopefully no one else. But Moony, Peter slurped his own tea noisily. You've done this before. Last year. Exactly, James nodded encouragingly. Remus sighed and said no more. What was the point? Whinging wasn't going to get him anywhere. He sipped his tea, willing his hand to stay steady. This was potentially the worst time of the month for a mission, he couldn't help thinking. Only 4 nights away from the full moon, and his magic felt stronger than usual, but also less predictable. He was restless, his skin crawling, his senses bare and his mood hot. He knew he was forgetting something. He just knew. A dark feeling of foreboding that told him all the curses in the world would be no good. He stood up sharply, knocking the teacup off the armchair. Sirius was quick and stopped it mid-air with a flick of his wand. Remus ignored this. "Going to bed," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Okay, Moony," James nodded brightly. He glanced at Lily. "Think we'll stay down here for a bit." Peter looked at Sirius, then at Remus with an expression of faint terror. Remus tutted. "It's okay, Wormtail. I'm really just going to sleep. See you all tomorrow." He didn't sleep. His brain wouldn't let him. He hated Dumbledore, and he hated Greyback. He hated the war, and as the hours got smaller and smaller, he hated Peter too. He did not hate the other werewolf, though, the one who was not Greyback, just as he'd not hated Livia, though she frightened him. The more Remus thought about what was ahead of him, the less sure he was about his preparedness. Yes, he knew more curses and hexes now than Regulus and Severus combined, probably, but the more he thought back to his encounter with Livia, the less useful these things seemed. Hadn't she said it herself? You can wear that uniform and wave your silly stick, but you know that you have more in common with me than anyone else in that castle. He knew she was stronger than him. She could hurt him if she wanted to, but she hadn't, not really. Instead, he remembered the pity he felt immediately after their meeting. He remembered the desire to help her and his conversations with both Ferox and Dumbledore. As dawn broke, Remus lay wide awake, thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, his heart hammering and his stomach fizzing with excited anticipation. If he had to go to war, then fine. But this was his battle, and it would be on his terms.
Everything okay?
Yes.
Did you lose your spot?
Yes. There it goes. All right, I've got to do a song.
My favorite part.
It was an April morning when they told us we should go. As I turned to you, you smiled at me. How could we say no? Oh, the fun to have, to live the dreams we always had. Oh, the songs to sing when we at last return again. Slipping off a glancing kiss to those who claim they know. Below the streets that steam and hiss, the devil's in his hole.
You know, I haven't really thought about it, but this is technically a musical. There's so many songs.
It's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Well, that was a Led Zeppelin song, too. Saturday, 21st of January, 1978. Breakfast that morning was a bleak affair. Remus was ravenously hungry, but no one else seemed to be eating. Sirius was on black coffee, and it was already making him jittery. He kept bobbing up and down in his seat. Mary and Marlene were the only ones acting halfway normal, because neither of them knew about the assignment. 3 broomsticks later? Mary asked brightly. Lily and James nodded, trying to smile, and succeeded in only looking slightly deranged. They were holding hands under the table again, and Remus was trying not to think about it, instead reaching for the plate of bacon for another helping. "Can I bring Yaz?" Marlene was asking Mary. Mary raised an eyebrow. I suppose." "Great!" Marlene grinned. Mary's mouth twisted, but she didn't say anything. They walked into Hogsmeade. The walk into Hogsmeade seemed longer than ever. Fortunately, Lily and James had duties to perform, so at least they weren't following Remus about, just waiting. Unfortunately, Sirius had enough nervous energy for 3 people, and Remus could feel it coming off him in waves. "Where shall we go?" he murmured, low enough so only Peter and Remus could hear. "Everywhere, I suppose." "Would it help if I was Padfoot?" "Would it help if I was Padfoot?" "If you like." "Shall I change too?" Peter asked. "If you like." Remus was unable to summon up very much interest. He was too busy trying to work out whether or not Hogsmeade smelled genuinely different, or whether it was because he he usually tried to ignore sense as a human. They ducked into a shop alleyway, and Peter and Sirius transformed behind some bins. Wormtail crawled onto Remus's palm, and he sat him on his shoulder. The weight was a small comfort, even if his whiskers tickled Remus's neck. Nice to have Padfoot too, big and black and excitable, trotting alongside like a loyal companion. Yes, much better when your friends aren't human, in Remus's opinion, at least right now. They walked. Remus deliberately avoided the high street, instead wandering round the backs of the houses. How many people lived in Hogsmeade? How many were potentially in danger without even knowing it? He tried sniffing the air, and it was like exercising a muscle he'd allowed to atrophy. Some scents came through stronger than others. Padfoot, obviously, and Wormtail. Household waste from the bins, compost from back gardens, and magic, that heavy iron taste which settled on his tongue like treacle when he was this close to the moon. Other students, the sickly sweet aroma of honeydukes, and the comforting smell of parchment emanating from scriven shafts. The forest. He could smell the forest if he really tried. He closed his eyes briefly and inhaled. Green, lush, dense, teeming with life. And magic. At first it seemed like an indulgent whim, just an idea that he rather liked the smell and wanted to get closer. But the further they walked and the closer they got, the more important it felt. Remus had the impression that something had been drawing him in that direction for some time now. The forbidden forest loomed large over the little village, miles and miles of darkness and danger, against a backdrop of blue-grey snow-capped mountains. For the first time, as a human anyway, Remus had the urge to go in, to explore. Padfoot whined beside him as they left Hogsmeade and the road behind them. He wondered if Sirius could smell it too, but it was impossible to get any sense out of him in dog form. Remus tried to switch off his rational mind for a moment. Was there anything there at all, or was he just overthinking? The magic in the forest wasn't the same as at Hogwarts. It wasn't human. It didn't have that metallic gunpowder smell Remus had come to associate with most witches and wizards he knew. It was more organic, less precise, a heady, mulchy smell of soil and decay. There was power in there. He knew this instinctively, dizzying, huge, earth-moving power. It would have been frightening once. But the closer Remus grew, the surer he was. The power was his, if he wanted it. All he needed to do was let it in. Another scent revealed itself. An animal. Blood. Remus felt the wolf inside stir, and his desire to enter the forest grew almost impossible to resist. Padfoot barked sharply and ran in front of him. The great black dog turned on Remus, raising its hackles and emitting a low growl. Remus blinked, snapping back into himself. Wormtail was squeaking and quivering on his shoulder. Maybe he had been for a few minutes now. "Sirius?" Remus frowned. "Move!" Padfoot continued to growl. Wormtail gave another squeak before scuttling down Remus's robes into his left pocket. Remus felt hot and angry, as if something had been snatched from him that he wanted, that he needed. He made to move forward, and Sirius transformed back into himself. "Where are you going?" he said, still blocking Remus's way. "Can't you smell it?" Remus stopped trying to get past and caught Sirius's eye. "Can you?" he whispered, not quite believing it. "There's something bad in there. It must be the wolf." "It is," Remus nodded eagerly. "Surely that was obvious." "I can't be sure, though." Sirius frowned. "I can," Remus replied. "Let me past." Sirius moved again, blocking him. "No," he said. "You've done what you said you'd do. We know it's there. Let's go back, now." Remus stared over Sirius's shoulder into the dark, wintry wilds beyond. He wanted this so badly, more than he'd ever wanted anything except, maybe, the boy standing in front of him. "I have to," he finished. It was an insufficient explanation, but it was all he had. "There you lot are! Where's Pete?" Sirius and Remus's deadlock was interrupted by James's cheerful shout. They both turned to see him striding toward them from the village, Lily at his side. "What are you doing all the way out here? Thought you were supposed to be trailing your scent all over town or something." "Yeah, we're just coming back now," Sirius said, which Remus thought was pretty cheeky, not to mention presumptuous. "You lot can," Remus said. "I'm not." "Not what?" Lily asked, confused. "Where is Peter?" Remus could feel the warm weight of Wormtail's very little body in his pocket, but said nothing. James had been agonizing for months over when to break the animagus thing to his girlfriend, and now was definitely not the right time. "I'm not coming back with you. I have to go in there." He pointed at the forest, aware of how mad he sounded. "You what?" James looked confused. His eyes flicked to Sirius automatically, which only annoyed Remus even more. Sirius wasn't his keeper, for God's sake. "The wolf's in there," Sirius explained, "and Mooney's gone completely mental and decided he has to go in and face it right now." Remus snapped his head back to Sirius, outraged and betrayed. "I have not gone mental, you prick," he said fiercely. How could he explain that this was just what had to happen? That he knew it deep down in his marrow, at his very core? "You lot go back or wait here. You won't understand." "Help us understand, Remus." Lily came forward gently. "This isn't like you, barreling into a fight." Remus nearly laughed in her face. Did no one remember who he was? What he was? "I'm not going to fight anyone," he said. "I just want to talk to them. That's what I'm supposed to do." They were all staring at him, unconvinced. His anger flared again, and he had a very unpleasant thought, that he could very easily get past them if he wanted to. The magic in the forest was more than enough. It made him feel strong. He could force his friends to stay in place, and it wouldn't even tire him out. He probably wouldn't even need his wand. The notion burned so brightly it frightened him. He looked at Lily again, refusing to look at Sirius or James. We were wrong. This isn't a battle, and I'm not a weapon against the werewolves," he tried to explain. "I'm a way in. They need to know I don't mean any harm." "But Remus, if they're on you know whose side—" "They're not," he snapped. "Not all of them." Lily looked uncertain, and Sirius was practically burning a hole in the back of Remus's head with his indignance. Remus ran his hands through his hair. They weren't going to understand. How could they? He barely did. "Look," he said. "This is important, and I need you all to trust me." It wasn't a request, and nor was it received as one. James and Lily looked at each other, then at Sirius. James nodded. "Okay, Mooney." Sirius made a noise of protest, but Remus was too far gone now to care. He would make it up to him later, when he could think clearly, when every instinct in him wasn't telling him to run into the forest at full pelt. "Okay," he nodded back. "Stay here." A tug in his midriff as the magic took over. He would never be sure whether or not he'd done it on purpose, and at the time he simply did not care. He turned and began to walk into the forest, quickly, his long legs making long strides, his friends behind him, unmoving, unable to follow.
Oh no, has Greyback captured Lupin? Something about it.
Wormtail's still in his pocket.
Oh, good point. Oh no. That's going to be interesting.
Peter is in his pocket.
Maybe Peter is going to be the ex machina that saves the day.
Maybe.
Deuce ex Peter.
I'm just not really intrigued by this werewolf thing.
That's what you said last time.
I know.
You ended up really liking it.
I know. Maybe it's just the way it's all set up.
Maybe.
Remus is so angry and angsty about it. Maybe that's what bugs me.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm just like, ugh.
I mean, there is a bit of that. And before
you don't know what I am. Have you forgotten? I'm a monster. Like, okay. And then Sirius being just so protective. I'm just like, okay.
That's his man now. He's gotta protect him.
I don't know. It's not jiving
I'm
for
saying
me.
that's what you said last time, and then jives were had.
Jives were had, but I just I can still not like the setup and then still like what happens.
Fair enough. I'm just saying, don't knock it till you read it.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying I'm not gonna like what happens. I'm just saying this right here.
It's fair enough.
It was okay.
And hello, Maddie. Also, before we forget, Brandon, thank you for putting your mom on the channel. And hope you enjoy the rest of the live stream when you come back and watch it later. Also, Angela.
I'm wondering if HIV has been hinted at. I wonder if they will use AIDS by name. Jen A had an unknown virus. Maybe they'll go with that. I'm older and from San Francisco.
Maybe.
I mean, it's 1978 right now.
Yeah.
So.
I think our theory was that something like that was going to happen to Grant.
Yeah, that was our theory.
But Grant seems to be alright, so I don't know how they would bring it into the story at this point.
Well, I'm wondering if they're going to use the werewolves as the metaphor for the rise of HIV.
Maybe. I guess they could do
because
that. Instead of just kind of putting it in there, little subtle.
Right. Because that's what Lupin is in the books. He's a metaphor for HIV, so I don't know. Ignoring it would not be like not mentioning Spanish flu. I haven't listened for a while, so I'm just coming out of nowhere.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, so I guess to kind of catch you up a little bit is our theory was that something was going to happen to Grant and kind of bring in the whole AIDS
right
epidemic into the story because of the time frame. But Grant is he moved away and he's in a much better place.
Yeah, he's
and
living his best life now. He's
to be
he's
doing
getting
all
himself together.
I mean, maybe that'll still play in later. Maybe he just doesn't know that he has it or something.
Right, like maybe he'll get his life together and then all of a sudden, boom, he'll find out he has AIDS. Mm-hmm. Or maybe Christopher will get it.
I guess Christopher is the backup, I guess.
He could end up with it. I don't know.
To bring it into the story. I don't know. I feel like it's already... The wolf is already the metaphor for it.
Right.
In the main book. I think using the werewolves to do that anymore would... I kind of ruin it a little bit and make it too obvious.
Well, I think they would use it in the sense of using it in the way that HIV like kind of came on the scene. It's the same thing. Like maybe like the werewolves are starting to like come on the scene and they're bad and they're evil.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe you could go with that angle.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
How they get it in there now.
Or how it's all going to play out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. The setup was just kind of blah for me.
Yeah, it didn't really do anything for me, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of setups that really do it for me.
Fair
enough.
I
Guess there are. It's just very rare, It's rare when they like set something up and you're just like, "Oh my god, what's going to happen?" It's usually when it ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. I just was like, and you forgot Peter was in your pocket and you're just rushing. And plus, like the last time that he did this werewolf thing, he just rushed into it and he almost got his ass handed to him. Now he's doing it again.
Let's see if Ferox will save him this time.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Maybe Ferox will be there.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe that's who he senses.
Oh.
It's gonna not be Greyback, it's Ferox.
Maybe.
Or Peter's just going to have to save him.
Well, I mean, the story does play... we will get to 1981-83. We're just not there yet. It is that part of the story does happen. It just hasn't happened yet. We're still at Hogwarts. Lily and James have yet to die.
Yeah, last year of Hogwarts. So we're almost to the point where James and Lily die, but not quite.
We've got quite a lot more of seventh year yet to go.
But yeah, that was a lot of setup. So I really don't have much more to talk about.
No, we can
chapter,
just start
so
the next
maybe
one.
just go to the next one and see if this setup pays off.
Let us see.
Now my face like itches.
Lola, why you do that?
Oh, she didn't.
Why you do that?
She's just a very furry kitty.
She's just a lily baby. She's just a lily baby. She's a lily daughter. She's a sweet daughter. She's a nice daughter.
That's true. Maybe this situation will foreshadow Peter running away later on.
Oh, maybe.
He's gonna like hurt his toe or something and run away. And hide. Like a rat.
Oh God, here we go. Think positively. This is going to be a good chapter. Chapter 130. 7th year. Castor. It was easiest not to think, for the next few minutes at least. Remus did not slow down or tire as quickly as usual. Even his hip had stopped hurting. Despite the wheedling guilt he had to keep at bay, he'd not felt so good in months. The scent grew stronger as the woods grew thicker, and a shade of darkness fell, casting strange shadows which seemed to move in the corner of Remus's eyes. He didn't think. It was too late to think. He was too far gone. Bloody hell! A voice in his head popped out of nowhere. When you go for it, you really go for it, don't you, sweetheart? Grant. Remus didn't want to do this, not now. Shut up, he willed his brain. Oh, charming, Grant's voice cackled. Here I am, only trying to help. Don't I always try to help? I don't need help. If you didn't, I wouldn't be here, Grant's voice countered. I could be someone else, if you prefer. Lots of sensible people to choose from. I've got Ferox here, want to chat with him. Or Lily, though she's a bit whiny if you ask me. Dumbledore? Nah, a bit of a prick. Oh, how about your posh boy, eh, Mooney? Shut up, Remus repeated, walking faster, breathing harder. Yeah, Grant's voice agreed, slyly. I can see why you wouldn't want to talk to him after what you just done. I had to, Remus insisted. None of you would understand. Well, they won't now, you lunatic. Remus ignored the voice. There was no time for this. He would just have to deal with the consequences later. He knew there was no coming back from it now. Not really. Hope you like the woods, Remus, Grant was whispering now. 'Cause no one's going to want you back in civilization after that mess. Shut up, shut up, shut up! Remus raged inside his head like a mad person, like someone deranged. Perhaps it had been a mistake to go alone. Perhaps he'd really lost it, and his friends were only trying to keep him safe. No. He caught the scent again, and it stirred up his insides so much that he felt as though he were being propelled by it, dragged forward, unable to resist. It was a feeling he'd only ever associated with transformation before, and he had no control over it in his human form than the wolf did. He had no more control over it in his human form than the wolf did. It was him. The other wolf, somewhere out there. Remus had to find him, or else... He wasn't sure, but it wasn't even worth considering. Something moved just ahead, and Remus froze. The different scents of the forest began to pile up. He had to concentrate to identify and categorize each one. There was magic, and there was a different kind. It wasn't the wolf. It was female, or feminine at least, and not lupine at all. He walked toward it, confused. It was very close, but he couldn't see anything. He found himself in a grove of silver birches, spindly, ghostly white trees with papery bark that glowed in the darkness of the woods. The scent was strong, but still nothing, and he'd lost the wolf's trail. Impatient, Remus pulled out his wand and cast a revealing spell. A periseum! His wand seemed to jump in his hand, the force of magic was so strong. An anguished wail filled the air, and the tree closest to Remus was no longer a tree, but a young woman. A dryad. She was beautiful in her own way. Slender and tall as the tree she guarded, her skin glowed as white as silver bark, and her hair rustled with the brittle wintry leaves. She rounded on him, baring sharp yellow teeth, and he staggered back, shocked and amazed. "Go away, nasty thing," she hissed, eyes narrowing. They were the colour of new spring leaves, unnaturally bright and fierce. "I dealt with the other. I'll deal with you too." "Which other?" "The other half, beast," she glowered. The dryad was at least a head taller than him and advanced at a steady pace, roots unfurling from the soles of her feet and winding toward him. As dreadful and fearsome as she was, Remus had to stay focused on his goal. "I'm looking for him. The other. I mean you no harm, or your, trees." "Wizards do not belong here," she continued to scowl. "Even half-beast wizards. Get out." "I will as soon as I've—" "Nasty, cruel, wicked creatures. Foul, unnatural. Don't belong. Too dangerous." "It's not a full moon," he insisted. "I'm not going to transform, I swear." "Not wolf," she rasped, very close to him now, ivy and nettles winding their way toward him, covering his shoes. "Wizard. Wolf is welcome. Wolf is natural." "Oh." Remus didn't have a response to that, and the vines were tickling his ankles now, stinging him as they tightened. He still had his wand. He still had every curse he'd spent the last 2 weeks practicing, but now that the time had come to use them, Remus's conscience pricked. The dryad was only trying to do what she was supposed to do, guarding her trees. "Please," Remus said, holding his hands up, hoping he looked deferential. "I promise I won't hurt you, or anyone. I just need to find the other wolf. Then I'll go. I'll really go." "Lying, false-tongued, dirty." "I swear." "And the little one?" "What? Who?" Close up, he could see that her face was not smooth like human skin, but finely lined and cracking like bark, coal black beneath the tissue-thin outer layer. She gave another harsh wail and raised her hand. Remus flinched, but she didn't touch him. Instead, there was a violent shaking inside of his robed pocket, and Wormtail came flying out, falling to the mulchy ground beneath with a soft pat. "Shit," Remus thought. "Bloody Peter!" The dryad raised her arm again, and Peter transformed into his human shape, trembling and cowering on the ground. "Please, don't hurt me," he whimpered, covering his face. Remus stepped in front of him quickly. Of all the people to have at your side in a situation like this. "Liar," the dryad hissed triumphantly, leafy hair bristling. "Deceitful, filthy wizards." She was raising both arms now, and her eyes had darkened to the colour of pine needles. Remus was now completely sure that she meant them serious harm. Every one of her pointed little teeth was showing. He couldn't disarm her. She didn't have a wand. He wasn't even sure if the usual defensive spells would work on her. Remus had just decided to use a knockback jinx to buy himself some time when... Confringo! Peter squeaked behind him, pointing his stubby little wand over Remus's shoulder. "Oh, Jesus Christ!" Remus thought as he ducked reflexively. Fortunately, Peter was either so frightened or just inept that the blasting curse didn't have its usual devastating effect. Still, it was enough to cause some serious damage to the trees behind the dryad, setting a few leaves on fire. She screamed, a heart-wrenching, painful screech, and turned immediately to tend to the smoking branches. Peter and Remus took their chance and ran, vines snapping as they tore their feet from the ground. Peter followed Remus, but neither of them were especially fast runners, and by the time they judged it safe to stop, they were both wheezing heavily. "Bloody hell, Pete!" Remus panted, bending forward, one arm against an oak for support. "I didn't know what to do!" Remus replied, red-faced, pale hair plastered to his forehead. "Let's go back, Remus, please!" He looked round anxiously. They were even deeper in the woods now, and other than their own laboured breathing, it was deathly quiet. Still, Remus shook his head, straightening up. "No," he said. "I have to find them. She hurt him." "So what?" Peter replied, indignant. "We're not supposed to be here." "Look, I'm sorry you got caught up in this." Remus frowned impatiently. Now that they weren't in immediate danger, his desire to hunt the other wolf down had returned. He could smell blood, he was sure of it. "But I have to. You can go back if you want. Go and find the others." Peter looked behind him, then back at Remus, his eyes big and shimmering. "On my own?" The terror in his voice was palpable, and Remus suddenly wanted him gone more than anything in the world, in case the terror was catching. "I'll give you my watch so you won't get lost," Remus offered. "No!" Peter stiffened his lips. "I'll come with you." Peter's heartbeat was almost deafening, and Remus was starting to feel sorry for him. "It's okay," he whispered. "If something happens, you can just transform back and go tell the others, can't you? You'll know the way better as a rat." "I won't leave you, Remus," Peter whispered shakily. "I can be brave. I know I can." Remus squeezed his shoulder. "Fine. This way. Keep as quiet as you can." The Dryad had not come after him, thank goodness. Remus couldn't remember everything about tree guardians, but he was fairly sure they couldn't leave their groves. Or maybe that was naiads. He couldn't remember the difference. But it didn't matter now. He picked up the scent properly. A mouth-watering, rich iron tang that made his stomach growl shamefully. They were still days out from the full moon, but that didn't seem to matter to the wolf inside Remus, who was scaling the walls of its prison, howling for freedom. "It's close," Remus whispered to Peter, as they pressed through a heavy thicket, properly announcing their arrival to every creature nearby. There was another heartbeat, not far away, and that sounded frightened too. A few steps more and Remus could hear laboured breathing, like someone who'd been struggling for a while now and was beginning to tire. Closer still, and he could smell the sweat and the rage from the struggle. It was such a strong mix of emotions and energy that Remus was momentarily lost in the fog of it, too overwhelmed to see a clear direction. Then it changed, stilled suddenly. A harsh voice rang out, shattering the quiet of the woods, shaking birds from their nests. "Remus Lupin!" Peter gave out a sharp squeak of terror before leaping a foot in the air, transforming and turning tail, scampering away from Remus. No matter. Remus stood taller. "I'm here," he whispered back. "Come to me." That tugging sensation returned to Remus's chest, and he followed it, letting himself be drawn forward, through to a new, small clearing of trees. At its centre was an ancient yew, gnarled and creaking, and bound to the trunk was a young man. The Dryad had tied him in place with miles of cruel, twisted bramble. The thorns were cutting into his worn leather cloak and puncturing the skin of his neck. His arms were at his sides, and despite obvious attempts to free himself, the brown, sinewy stems held firm. He wasn't struggling now, though. He was just staring at Remus, eyes bent forward. Head bent forward, eyes dark and inscrutable. His head was shaved, as Livia's had been, and his clothes were weather-worn and threadbare, but there the resemblance ended. He was tall as Remus, and perhaps only a few years older. His skin was as dark as tanned leather, his features handsome and striking. He smiled slowly, showing rows of straight white teeth. "Remus Lupin, set me free." "Who are you?" Remus held back, gripping his wand inside his pocket. "I'm Castor. Set me free. I'm your brother." Remus cocked his head. The man was trapped, utterly at Remus's mercy. He felt his courage returning. My brother, are you? Greyback send you?" "Yes." "Well," Remus leaned against the nearest tree and folded his arms. "You're going to have to give me a decent reason to set you free then, aren't you?" Castor roared furiously, fighting against his bonds once more, tearing his clothes and driving the thorns deeper into his neck. He was clearly very strong, with a broad build, thick biceps flexing against the vines. "Oh dear," Remus tutted conversationally. "Looks like you're not going anywhere without me." He would later wonder where this ridiculous sense of cockiness had come from. After all, the situation Remus now found himself in was every bit as dangerous as the attack on Diagon Alley, which had turned his mind inside out. Perhaps it was the woods and the power he could feel coursing through him. Perhaps it was Grant's voice still ringing in his ears. Perhaps it was simply the familiarity of the situation. Remus had been facing off against bullies who thought they had him figured out since he was 6 years old. "So," he said smiling, "wanna talk?" "I was sent to talk." "Really? Just talk?" "Just talk. Set me free." Remus played with the tip of his wand thoughtfully, as if he hadn't a care in the world. "See, I've got a bit of a problem believing you, Castor, mate. Seeing as the last time Greyback sent someone just to talk to me, an innocent woman ended up dead." "My father recognizes his mistake in sending Livia," the werewolf said earnestly. He'd calmed down a bit now, and was clearly watching Remus to see where this was going. "So this time he's sent me." "I can see right through that too, you know," Remus mused. "Thought a good-looking bloke might, pique my interest, did he?" Castor kept staring at him, eyes narrowing. Remus shrugged and continued. "I mean, I'm flattered, Castor. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you're lovely, but I'm still not interested. And I have to say, so far I'm not very impressed. Not as good at magic as your pal Livia, then. She'd evaporated right out of that, no trouble." "That tree bitch!" Castor snarled, struggling again. "Whatever she's done, these vines. I can't use magic." "Oh, I see," Remus nodded. "Well, must remember to thank her next time I see her." "Livia told me about you," Castor said. "Said you're Dumbledore's pet hound, toothless, wouldn't hurt a fly, wouldn't chase a rabbit on a full moon." "I'm nobody's pet," Remus replied, his jaw clenching. "And nor should you be. What's so great about Greyback, eh? What do you lot think's going to happen when we defeat Voldemort?" "The same thing that always happens to our kind," Castor replied, giving Remus a pitying look. "We'll be hunted and oppressed." "Don't you want to change that?" Remus implored, taking a step forward. "Don't you have a family in the real world? Don't you want a family one day?" "We are a pack. We are everything." Remus sighed. "You don't understand. He's lying to you. I know there's a way to make things better, to really change the way we're treated, but it can't be like this. Don't you see?" Castor sneered at him disdainfully. "Just as Livia said. Toothless. Told father you weren't ready. Told him it was too soon." "Too soon for what?" "For the big night, of course." Castor was smiling again, a sinister grin which made Remus feel uneasy. The werewolf continued, recognizing Remus's uncertainty. "On the night of the next moon, the pack will be on the hunt. It'll be a hunt such as the world has not seen since the Dark Ages." "Why are you telling me this?" There was a quaver in Remus's voice now, as much as he tried to disguise it. "You know I'm going straight to Dumbledore." Castor laughed, a breathless, hollow sound coming from deep inside his chest. "Perfect." Crack. Remus winced as the air around them shimmered slightly, and he staggered back from the figure who had appeared between them in the clearing. She hissed, low under her breath, steely eyes flicking from Remus to Castor. Livia. "Sister!" Castor rasped, straining for freedom once more. "Release me!" "You failed our father," she replied. "Punishment awaits." "No!" Castor protested. "It was the Dryad. I couldn't..."
Excuses, Castor.
Livia raised a hand and Castor was silenced, unable to move or make a sound. Remus's insides froze as she turned on him. "Hello, my love. Are you ready?" Remus pulled his wand out and pointed it at her, assuming a dueling stance and rooting himself to the ground. She would not hold him, this time. This time he knew what to expect. "I'm not going anywhere, Livia," There isn't time for this. The moon approaches. She tutted, walking toward him, as ragged and filthy and wild as he remembered her. Drop that silly stick. She raised a hand and twisted it mid-air, as if she were turning a doorknob. Remus felt the strength of it, prying his fingers apart, his wand burning in his hand, but this time he did not drop it. He clenched his teeth and gathered every ounce of magic from the woods around him. No. Remus Lupin, she growled. You will come with us. She raised both arms now and flicked her fingers so that they fanned out from her palms. The trees surrounding Remus caught light in an instant, from trunk to branches, blazing columns of fire roaring round him. He was terrified, but he was not letting go.
Hold on. You can keep going. I'm just going to go let Billy up. I think he has to go to the bathroom.
All right. No, he repeated, stepping backwards slowly. He would run if he had to. Let the dryads deal with them. Let the centaurs do it, come to that. You didn't just show up in a forest like this and start burning it down. Livia snapped her fingers then, and at once Castor was freed from his bondage, gasping and snarling. He joined his packmate, and now there were two of them, their eyes glowing like hot coals, reflecting back the flames surrounding them. The time has come, Remus Lupin, they said in unison, as black smoke began to fill the air, the scent of sap and pine fizzling round them. No, he said again, though he could see no way out now. Mordio, he shouted, aiming his wand at them as he backed away. Castor recoiled, growling, but Livia laughed throatily and waved her hand again, dismissing the curse as if it were no more than a cobweb. This was it. They were going to take him, God knows where, and make him one of them. He would never see his friends again, never see Sirius again. He'd been such an idiot forcing them to stay behind. Now there was no one left to protect him. There's you. Remus didn't recognize this voice. It wasn't Grant's or anyone he'd spoken to before, but maybe it was right. There was a spell he hadn't considered simply because he'd never mastered it properly. But he was in dire straits now, and he had more power than ever at his disposal. As bright embers and burning leaves rained down on the three of them, Remus gathered all his resources, his strength and his rage, and every bit of joy in his heart. He would have to be ready to run as soon as the incantation was spoken. If it failed, he would have no time at all to make his escape. He breathed in carefully, and, just before he cast the spell, recalled Sirius's eyes, and Sirius's mouth, and Sirius grinning. I'm mental about you. Expecto Patronum! He practically screamed it, extending his arm, directing his wand as an enormous silver animal burst forth, leaping toward Livia and Castor, huge jaws wide, claws bared. In a split second before he began to run, Remus saw both of them cover their eyes and turn to run in the opposite direction as the great beast lunged at them. But there wasn't time to stay and enjoy his success, so he didn't. He ran again for the edge of the woods, back to Hogsmeade and the Wizarding World and his friends. Remus ran so hard that his legs were burning and the pain in his hip was like a spear in his side, but he did not stop, lungs full of wood smoke and eyes watering. He just kept going until the trees began to thin and the light grew stronger. Peter and Sirius were still there. Sirius was pacing erratically back and forth on the footpath. Peter was sitting on the ground with his knees drawn up, staring at the woods. He looked as though he'd been crying. Remus staggered out into the daylight and felt ready to collapse right there. Peter stood up, wiping his eyes in disbelief, and Sirius ran toward him, and then stopped suddenly, and was knocked back as though he'd hit a wall. Furious, he gave out an angry grunt. Remus allowed one of the knots inside him to unravel, and the barrier was lifted. He limped toward his two friends, wheezing. Sorry, he murmured. Much to his surprise, Sirius threw his arms round his neck and held him tightly. His heartbeat thrummed against Remus's, and he hugged him back, exhausted and grateful. We couldn't come and help, Sirius said, his voice hollow and hoarse. Whatever you did, we couldn't follow you. I'm sorry, Remus said again. I'm so sorry, Remus, Peter suddenly burst out, his eyes filling with tears again. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Remus reached out an arm to pat his shoulder, but Sirius wouldn't let him go yet. Finally, Remus came back to his senses and gently untangled himself. "I have to see Dumbledore, right now. Where are the others?" "They had to go back," Sirius explained. "Curfew. They said they'd tell McGonagall." "Good," Remus nodded. "Come on, we have to go now." He began to hobble toward the village. "Moony, are you okay?" Sirius hurried alongside him, an arm under his shoulder for support. "Just tired," Remus said. "You're covered in... is that soot? There was a fire. Wormtail said something was summoning you." I can't explain it yet. Please, just don't ask me." "Fine." There was a cold edge to Sirius's voice, which Remus didn't like, but he kept supporting him, and he kept going, so it would have to be ignored for now. One thing at a time. McGonagall was waiting for them at the school gates, her arms folded, deep lines creasing her forehead. "Professor," Remus spluttered, still coughing up smoke. "I'm sorry we missed curfew, but I need to see the headmaster, right—" "Yes, of course, Lupin. Come with me." McGonagall nodded quickly and took his arm from Sirius. She peered down at Sirius and Peter. "You two go to the tower and say nothing. I don't want any arguments. Do you hear me?" The two men were so surprised by these sharp instructions that they both nodded and left immediately, Sirius throwing one glance back at Remus. He told Dumbledore almost everything. He told him about the scent and the Dryad and Castor, about the fire and the plans Greyback had for his pack and Livia. He did not mention the barrier he'd somehow conjured to keep his friends back, nor did he explain he had known how dangerous it would be, or that he'd ignored every ounce of good sense he had in order to pursue Castor. Dumbledore seemed very pleased nonetheless. "Everything you've told me is immensely useful, Remus," the old man said, smiling across his desk at Remus with eyes twinkling with pride for the first time Remus could remember. "You were very brave and fulfilled your task admirably." I did, even though I went into the Forbidden Forest." "You followed your query, and I don't see that any harm has come to you. You are clearly a formidable wizard, like your father." Remus felt a very small twinge of pleasure at that, which put him more at ease. "This attack, though, the hunt they're planning." "Let the Order deal with that." Dumbledore shook his head, placing his hands on his desk and rising to his feet. "You have done quite enough, more than anyone could expect of a 17-year-old wizard." "Yes, but if I can—" "I am sorry I asked this of you, Remus." Dumbledore came round his desk and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. "I hope I will not have to ask again." "I'm on your side," Remus replied, feeling he ought to reiterate this. "I'll do what has to be done." Dumbledore's eyes glittered with triumph, and his grip tightened on Remus's shoulder. The fire had been put out by the Naiads, according to McGonagall, who walked him from Dumbledore's office to the infirmary. There'd been no trace of Livia or Castor, and it was assumed they'd apparated. Madame Pomfrey tutted over him, cleaned off the soot, and administered a pain-killing draught. By then he was breathing normally again, and perversely quite fancied a cigarette, though he didn't tell her that. Food was brought to him there, because by this time he'd missed dinner, and he ate a pleasant quiet supper in Madame Pomfrey's homely little office. Thankfully, he was permitted to walk back to Gryffindor Tower alone. His friends were all waiting, not in their usual place by the fire, but in a quieter corner near one of the far windows. They were all speaking in serious, hushed tones, and their heads turned at once to face him as he appeared through the portrait hole. He walked over, a bit woozy from the draught he'd taken, and they made room for him to sit in the window seat, squashed between Lily and Sirius, who quickly squeezed his hand before letting go. They all stared at him and waited for him to speak. So he did. He told them as much as he could, and a few things he hadn't to Dumbledore. Peter had luckily already covered the Dryad, and apparently the Marauders had spent much of their evening explaining the Animagus secret to Lily. Still, she covered her mouth in horror when Remus talked about encountering Castor and Livia's incredible powers, and the fire. Sirius was practically quaking with rage beside him, but held his tongue the whole time and let Remus finish. "Bloody hell," James said once the story was told. "Well done on the Patronus, though, mate." "Thanks." Remus blushed slightly. Trust James to find something praiseworthy in all that. Did you see what it was? No, he said quickly. It happened too fast. Not long afterward, they all trailed up to bed, one at a time, each one of them with their faces set in a determined mask. Remus realized he was not the only one who had a very trying day. He took a quick shower to get the last of the forest off of him, and brushed his teeth without looking in the mirror, too afraid of what he might see there. Sirius still hadn't tried to talk to him or confront him about the terrible betrayal back at the forest edge, but Remus was certain this was yet to come, and though he knew it would be hard, he looked forward to clearing the air. For hours he lay in bed, waiting and hoping. Sirius always came to him on a night like this, if something had happened. Sirius always knew when Remus needed to talk. Even when Remus didn't want to, Sirius could get it out of him and make everything all right again. Remus waited for a long time. Come on, he thought to himself. I need you. Where are you? He ain't a mind reader, sweetheart. Grant's chirpy little voice broke through once more. He knows me, though. Oh, yeah? You ever told him? Remus declined to answer because it was no longer necessary. Working through problems in your head using imaginary role-play was all well and good, but that's what he'd done when he'd felt most alone, when he thought he'd no one else to turn to. He realized with a sickening sense of shame just how stupid he'd been. Without wasting another moment, he slid out of bed and crossed the floor. He parted Sirius's bed curtains and whispered into the darkness. Sirius? What? Sirius was lying on his bed too, hands folded over his middle like a tombstone effigy. His coldness made Remus flinch, but he swallowed his pride. I need you. Sirius turned his head at once. He sighed and pulled back the covers. Get in. Remus scrambled inside eagerly. They lay next to each other, on their sides, staring at each other. Do you hate me? Remus asked. No, Sirius replied, voice still empty. I'm really sorry. I wanted to protect you all. I know. That's what James said. Sirius's voice had melted slightly and was now more petulant than angry. But it's no excuse, Remus continued. I wasn't myself. Do you understand? Sirius shrugged, moving the bedsheet so that they slid off his shoulder, exposing his collarbone. Remus tried not to get too distracted by that and licked his lips, meeting Sirius's eye again. I'll tell you everything, he said. You told us, Sirius replied tetchily. Not everything, Remus replied. There are things I don't want everyone to know about, but I want you to know. Is that okay? Sirius stared at him as if he couldn't believe his ears. A small smile was creeping onto his face, and he was obviously trying to suppress it. Go on. So he did. He told him every feeling he'd had, the irresistible pull into the forest, the rugged power of natural magic, the terrible guilt. By the time he'd stopped speaking, he realized that Sirius had reached out to him and was stroking his arm gently, back and forth, to comfort him. What made you think of casting a Patronus? Remus snorted lightly. It's stupid. It's stupid. Voice in my head. Ah. Not like the normal voices, though. Usually it's someone I know. Maybe this time it was just you. Remus thought about this. Made him feel funny. Sirius was still watching him, still stroking his arms. Remus remembered something else. It's a wolf, my Patronus. I didn't want the others to know. I don't want them to think... They'd never think badly of you, Moony. They know you too well. Do they, though? After today, I just feel so stupid. I got so caught up, I didn't know what to do. I just kept getting deeper and deeper. But you did the right thing in the end, Sirius said firmly, gripping him now. That's all that matters. He leaned forward and kissed Remus gently on the lips, a calming gesture. You came back to us. Remus looked down, lowering his voice to barely a whisper. He looked up at Sirius again, meeting those perfect blue eyes. I came back to you. Sirius kissed him again, harder. and did not stop for a long time.
Aww. I know it seems like I missed a lot of that, but I was actually out on the porch. I just didn't want to make any more noise than I had to. I was eavesdropping.
I figured you could hear it.
Oh, hey, methane output. So, after years and a lot of fan fictions, we've finally figured out who is the true Bark Lord.
Who?
The Tree Lady.
Oh.
Dyad.
Oh.
Get it? Bark Lord?
Yeah, I get it now. Sorry, I've read 3 chapters in a row. I'm a
Okay.
little slow on the uptake. I apologize.
It's okay. That was a heavy chapter. It was long.
That was a long boy.
I know. I'm glad we started it when we did. So
yes.
Time to get through it. And we had an appearance from Dumbledore.
Nice to see Dumbledore again. And McGonagall.
It was. Before we get into the details, I want to get your general opinion of this chapter, since, once again, we started out a chapter with werewolves and your hatred for the setup. First time, it turned into a win. What do we got this time? Yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay?
Yeah.
Why?
I just wasn't feeling it.
Why not?
Because I spent the whole time thinking, Remus, you're walking into a trap. You shouldn't go alone, but you're doing it anyway because no one could possibly understand.
That's true.
And then you get into deep shit.
Can kind of let it go when he was like 14, 15. Now you're 17. You're a grown man.
In the eyes of the wizarding world, yes, he is. And I don't know, it was just, he managed to save himself this time, but I'm just like, no one understands me. It's the draw of the wolf. They'll never understand. I must go to them.
I don't hate the fact that he was drawn in by the wolf. I hate the fact that this time he didn't have them come with him. I think if you wanted to show growth as Remus as a character, you should have had
at least Padfoot come with you. Like James and Sirius should have at least come.
Yeah.
Maddie, Remus is annoying many times, unfortunately. Yeah, is, I just feel like he literally just made the same mistake twice.
And yeah, this is one of those times where I think, if in hindsight, probably should have made it so he brought his friends, and then he ends up in a trap. But aha! You fools! I've brought my friends with me this time, and James and Sirius jump out from behind the tree in their animagus forms.
Right. Yeah.
You thought these were peaceful, wild creatures, but no, they're creatures of war.
We call this one Stark and this one Baratheon. Get 'em, boys! Or Clegane maybe is a better. Sirius is a dog.
And yes, that was a dad joke. It was also a reference to My Immortal.
Yes, it was a My Immortal reference as well. Look, Doda, they can see you. They can see the Doda. They can see the Doda. Yes.
The only fan fiction that is so unbelievably terrible, it's worth reading every chapter.
Or just listen to us read it.
Or that. We should reread that. That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Maybe not reread it on stream, but at least reread it for some clearer audio and
put it up there as an audiobook.
It was great.
I don't know. It's just like, and the only thing that kept him from going with them was Sirius.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay. Okay. I don't know. I mean,
Like,
I get the...
It's okay to have the love interest, but at the same time, the only thing, so you don't care at all for Lily, for James,
Well, I mean, he
for
thought about his
Peter.
friends, but, like, Sirius was the last thing. I don't know. Like...
Look, they're still in the honeymoon phase, alright?
Yeah, he thinks about Sirius a lot.
They're in the honeymoon phase. They just both came out. They can finally just be who they are together.
I get that. I just...
And they're also teenagers.
Yeah, that's
17.
True. Okay,
Come
fair
on.
enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's true.
You gotta give them some leeway.
Okay, I will give him some... I'll give him some leeway on that. But... Remus was a moron in this chapter.
He was.
Literally everyone was telling him, don't do this. Remember what happened last time. Also, why is Livia just able to do magic with her hands and, like, set shit on fire out of nowhere?
She studied in Africa, I guess. Right? That's where it was from?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. That's it.
Maddie. He is a moron in many chapters.
Kind of, yeah. Remus. For someone who goes on to be a teacher, not a smart man.
Not being very intelligent now. No.
But he learned from his mistakes, I guess. Well, we'll eventually learn from his mistakes. He hasn't learned yet.
So,
but hopefully eventually.
But now we've got this whole big hunt coming. So you know there's going to be something else where Dumbledore is going to be like... Dumbledore's going to need him when they do the hunt, and there's going to be another mission, and I'm just like, I don't like the... I just don't really like the werewolf subplot. I get that this is like...
we've had a win, we've had a not so much of a win. Let's just say it's 50-50 right now.
It's not that.
Let's hold out judgment until the next werewolf chapter.
It's
That's
not...
2 out of 3.
It's not that. It's that, okay, this is like primarily like an adventure romance kind of story. So you've got the romance, you've got the other subplots going on, and you have this like werewolf subplot where Remus is... Maybe this is part of the problem. I'm trying to figure out what the point of the werewolf subplot is.
I think the point is to give Remus something interesting to do in the years to follow after school. I think it's setting up your filler chapters, basically. Because Remus has to do something after school. And in those years, so they're probably going to use him, like, infiltrating the werewolves and Greyback's whole family.
Right, because he does that. He does that. But there's this whole thing with it where he's inexorably drawn to be part of them because the wolf part of him wants to be part of the pack. And I'm just like, I'm just not buying it. I'm not into it. I'm not feeling it. I just don't care. I'm like, okay, whatever. Here we go. He's gonna have an internal struggle with his inner wolf demon yet again. I don't know. I am frustrated by it. I am not into it.
I am still keeping it an open mind because we only had really 2 chapters where it touches on it, so it still has time to progress. So we'll see.
And I don't know about this whole, like... I think the whole thing with her setting this shit on fire is to demonstrate that, like, werewolves are inherently more powerful closer to the full moon. And can give the wizards an edge thing.
They've talked about that a lot with Remus. Where his powers are, like, really strong during the full moon. Like, I remember the one chapter where he almost blinds himself doing Lumos the day after.
Yeah. I just,
Well, no worries, Kayla. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. They're talking about Lupin and his kid.
Yeah, I just saw that. He wasn't smart about taking care of his child either.
He had a freak out. Just like he keeps having freakouts in this story about being a werewolf. It just doesn't stop, and apparently it doesn't stop all the way until book 7. Jesus, Remus.
Till like a couple of weeks before he dies.
Yes, like God, dude.
He just figures it out, and then
then we gotta read this rest of this whole story where he's still gonna be like, I want friends and I want the love of my life, but I don't deserve it because I am a monster. Okay. So
I want friends. We're your friends. I don't deserve you. Why do I always push people away? It's okay. We forgive you. Get away from me.
It's literally this whole story. It's literally the entire story. It is.
We kind of had like a... I thought that was in the past, but this kind of brought it back. Because he had that. I understood, it's kind of representing those angsty
teenage years,
puberty and everything. Your hormones are going crazy. You're turning into a werewolf once a month. Things are complicated. It's stressful.
It sucks.
We're getting to the point where I'm hoping that this is kind of like a little setback, and then he's going to get back on track, and we won't see it as much.
Maddie G says he's a martyr, and it's getting annoying. It eventually gets annoying.
Yeah. Like I said, when he was younger,
because everybody does that when they're younger. Everybody at 15 is like full of angst and hates themselves. Like,
yeah,
that's part of it. But we're 17 now, and we are still doing the same things, still making the same mistakes.
But it's only one setback. So I'm hoping. Look, he's still only 17. All right, give him a break.
I know, but he literally just did this in Hogsmeade with a werewolf last time.
Yeah, I know.
And we're here. We're doing the same thing again. And the last time it happened, what did his friends tell him? Don't do this without us again. And what does he do? Get away from me. You won't understand. I need to do this on my own. Okay. And also, you forgot about Peter. That's rude, man.
Yeah, no wonder Peter betrays them.
Yeah, what the hell, man? He just left him in his pocket. I'll give Peter kudos. He tried. He was gonna be brave. He tried.
Yeah.
He failed. But he tried. He wanted to be brave. He just could not.
Yeah, he even refuses to be with Tonks because reasons.
I'm too old for her. I'm a werewolf. I'm going to cause her too many problems. It's insecure in every way, shape, and form.
Which is all fine to have, but at the same time, you've disclosed all this information. She knows you're a werewolf. She knows what she's getting into.
She also knows how old you are.
Yeah. And
she says, I don't care. I love you. For you.
Exactly. So just shut up and be happy, Lupin.
You deserve happiness. Enough already. Shut up and take your happiness. The only time he's
eat a piece of chocolate and get over it.
Yeah, the entirety of book 6, she was like super depressed because he pushed her away.
Yeah.
And then the only thing right now that's like good is Sirius. Everything else is just like, I don't even know. I'm like, oh, here we are again. We've only got 50-something chapters left in this book, and here we are, right back to Moron Remus all over again. Ugh.
Look, just be happy. We got it out of the way at the end of the stream, which means next stream we start out with a banger. Well, actually, next chapter is probably going to be Remus realizing all over again that, oh, he needs to trust his friends. He can't do this again. And Remus, you must. How about you just tell me the chapter title? Let me go off of that.
Interlude.
Okay. At least we're starting with that, not ending with it next time.
Do you want to see what the summary says? Interlude. Noun. Number 1, an intervening period of time, an interval. 2, a temporary amusement or diversion that contrasts with what goes before or after.
Okay. Maybe they're gonna set up their prank or something this chapter. Hey, don't skip ahead. You can't. Stop. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Maddie, what the fuck?
You can't skip ahead if I can't skip ahead.
You can skip ahead. No one's stopping. No one's stopping you.
That ruins the point of the stream.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't read anything.
Okay.
I just... That's probably what's going to be the next chapter. I can't believe I pushed my friends away. I can't do this anymore.
I'll never do that again. Until next time.
The only part of that chapter...
is Lupin Batman?
The only part of that chapter that I liked was... I did like Peter's attempt to be brave. I did like how he cast the Patronus. Like, he thought about all of his friends and everything else, and he just did it. I liked the Grant in his head.
Grant is pretty funny.
He was very funny in his head. And then other than that, I was just like, oh, here we go. Remus being a dumbass once again. For how stupid Remus is being, it really is a mark of failure on Greyback's part that he hasn't caught him yet.
Yeah.
Because Remus repeatedly serves himself up on a silver platter over and over.
Well, the first time Ferox saved him, and the second time, well, just incompetence in his people.
Yeah. And he did a Patronus, I guess. They weren't... Yeah. No one expects Expecto Patronum. I am
just speechless.
I am disappointed in Remus Lupin, and I hate him right now.
Well, we get to dwell on it until next Thursday.
I'm not dwelling on it. I'm forgetting all about it.
I'll remind you.
Can
you remember that last live stream?
Maddie is with me. She's like, she is just like, fuck Remus Lupin right now. He's a dickhead. I can't stand him. That's right. I've had enough of him. Go hide in the Whomping Willow for the next week before I see you again. God.
Poor Remus. See, this is why.
This is the problem. Don't give him any sympathy. He gives himself a big enough pity party. He doesn't need you to give him a pity party, too.
I mean...
Why can't we feel bad for Peter in this chapter?
You know why we can't feel bad for Peter. You know.
Alright, well, can we feel bad for James?
Yeah, we can feel bad for James. Definitely feel bad for James.
Okay, let's feel bad for James.
And Sirius.
And Sirius, yes. They deserve our sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
Lily, too. Why not?
And what about the druid or
the dryad?
The dryad.
Yeah.
She's just trying to protect her trees.
Yes, that was unfortunate.
She's like the Lorax.
She's like Treebeard.
Yeah.
Maybe her and Treebeard should get together. Since,
Ooh la la.
Since they lost the Entwives.
Mm.
They've just lost them.
That might be going out on a bit of a limb.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, so that been careening on such a high.
And then I just branched off there.
With the I'm ignoring that. with the story was in direction, it was a good direction. The story was going good.
Remus and Sirius just cannot see the forest for the trees.
Oh my god. Oh my god. I am worried to speak. I am concerned I'm going to say something and then you are going to pun it up.
I'm just saying. Remus was acting like a nut this story. This chapter.
Remus and Sirius got together. Everybody knows now. Everyone's okay with it. And then this happened. Again. With the same subplot. I'm over it. I'm not feeling this werewolf thing subplot. It'd be great if we can say he's just a teenager and will grow out of it. But we know he doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just gonna get worse, if anything else, probably. Oh my god, when Sirius goes to prison, this is gonna be terrible to read.
Oh my god, yeah, he's gonna be super depressed.
When Sirius goes to prison, it's gonna somehow be... It's all my fault. It's the wolf in me. I sent Sirius to prison. You just wait. That's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be all his fault somehow.
Yeah, he should have known. He should have stopped him from giving the responsibility over to Peter.
He should have stopped Sirius from confronting Peter. He should have stopped him. He knew Sirius would be too hot-headed.
Well, no, he thinks that Sirius did it, so he's just going to be like, how could I have ever loved that man?
Oh.
That evil.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be way more...
mutt.
Oh, it's going to be way worse than what I'm thinking. Yeah. Oh, my God. And then we're going to get a total 180 when he's in the Shrieking Shack.
The Shrieking Shack is going to be shrieking once again.
I want to kiss him, but James's son is right in front of me. I can't do that.
If the shack's a shrieking, don't come a whomping.
No, Lupin didn't know about Peter. I was having a brain fart in my rage over this.
You made me forget for a second.
Yeah, this is my rage over this chapter. Yeah.
But on that note,
hopefully it gets better.
Hopefully it gets better. We will find out next Thursday, 7 p.m. We will see you then. To everyone who joined us, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
And we will see you then.
Thank you much, everyone. See you next week.